Okay, so we are going to begin now, okay? All right, so I will just introduce myself shortly, and then we'll move on to the training. Okay, so my name is Dr. Yoman, and originally I'm from Ghana. I've been here in the Philippines for 2 years already. Okay, I've been here for 2 years. And then my background, back in my country, I'm a co-owner of nearly 50. I'm part of a farm of nearly 50 hectares of cacao because my mom and dad are both cacao farmers. So I grew up on the cacao farm. I planted cacao. We did all the practices in the cacao farm, harvest, dry, everything. All right, so practically, I know what it means to be a cacao farmer. Why? Because personally, I'm a cacao farmer. Okay, nonetheless, I'm also very educated. Okay, I have a master's degree in horticulture, in agronomy, and then presently I'm taking a doctorate degree in horticulture. And my focus primarily is on cacao, precisely on flowering, pod production. So that is my area of research now. So with my experience and background, I can help you to take your cacao farm business to the next level. The problem is that most farmers don't see their farm as a business. So they don't approach the farm as a business. And because of that, they don't really benefit so much from the farm. All right, so I hope that in this training, you'll be able to learn something and then put it into practice so that you can take your farm to another level. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see my slides from my laptop. Okay, so to begin with, we are going to look at the physiology of cacao flowering. Yeah, because to understand pollination, you need to understand the flower and the behavior of the flower. If you don't understand the flower, you will not be able to undertake proper pollination. Okay, so let's begin. So most of the time, for the farmers we have interacted with, according to them, their farms are able to produce so much flowers. But the farms, the trees, do not convert the flowers into pods. And it's been that for years. So they have very low yield and they don't know how to solve this particular problem. Okay, and yesterday too, we had one farmer who said his farm is 3 years old, but it doesn't even have enough flowers. Okay, so we are going to try to answer these questions. How to have more flowers and to get more pods from the flowers, okay? So we'll begin with the structure of the flower, okay? So the structure of the flower looks like this. So down here, let me begin from here. We have the stalk, we have the sepal here, and we have the petals. Okay, this is the petal. And we have the stamen here. The stamen is the male part of the flower, the male part of the flower. So the stamen contains the anther, which carries the pollen grains or the sperms of the flower. And down here, you can see ovary. So this is where the eggs are. So the eggs of the cacao tree that needs to be fertilized are found here. Okay. Then we have the style. The style is the female part of the flower. The female part of the flower. And then we have the staminodes. This looks like male parts, but they don't have any pollen grains, or they don't have any sperms. Okay. So we need to get the pollen grain from the stamen to fertilize the style, or to fertilize the male part of the flower. So if you look at this thing here, the drawing here, on the extreme left, we have the development of the flower. Okay, so we have the flower that looks like the pod. Okay, usually it takes like 1 month for the flower to be in the pod stage before it opens. Okay, so when it opens, it takes like 24 hours to 36 hours. And then if it's not fertilized, then it drops. Okay, so if it's fertilized, like we see here, then it will grow into the young pod and then grow into the mature pod. Okay, so that is how it looks like. So this is a colored image to show you. So as you can see, over here we have the sepal, and then we have the petals here. So inside the petal, we have the stamen. The stamen, like I told you, is the male part of the flower. Okay, is the male part of the flower. So the problem of the structure is that the petals covers the male part of the flower, and because of that, insects find it very difficult to get themselves attached to the stamen to carry the pollen grains, and then they will transfer the pollen grains from the stamen to the style. This is the style, and up here we have the stigma. So the pollen grains need to move from the stamen all the way here to the style. This is the female part of the flower. Okay, so because of the structure, it's very difficult for insects to pollinate. Okay, as a matter of fact, there are 3 types of flowers. 3 types of flowers in the cacao, on the cacao tree. Irrespective of geographic location or country, whether you are in Europe or America or you are in Africa, every cacao has got 3 types of flowers. The first type is called the convergent flowers. Okay, so as you can see here, the staminals converge. They converge. They converge like that. So the convergence hides, it hides the style or the female part of the flower. It covers it. Okay. The second type of flower is called the flowers. So as you can see in this picture, the staminals point straight. They are not like the convergent. They are straight, like that. Okay. And then the third type of flower is called the splayed flowers. Okay, so the staminals are divergent. Okay, so we have the convergent, we have the power, and splayed. Okay, the splayed we can call it divergent flowers. Okay, so the staminals moves outward at the tip, like you can see in these particular flowers here. Okay. So this is the difference. Okay. And the difference is very important because it helps us to understand what pollination is all about. Okay. So only the convergent and parallel flowers can be successfully pollinated, okay, by flowers, which means that the flake cannot be pollinated. They cannot be pollinated by insects. Okay, so this is okay because the tree is made up of around 56% convergent flowers and then 37% divergent parallel flowers. Okay. However, I have to say that the pollinators are a little choosy. Okay, from research, it has been documented that the pollinators prefer the parallel flowers most of the time. And that constitutes like 37%. That constitutes like 37% of the flowers. So potentially we have around 37% that will be pollinated naturally. So potentially that is how it looks like. Okay, now let's talk about the staminate. So it's like the stamen, okay? The staminate is like the stamen, okay, which is the male flower, but they don't produce pollen. So this is the what do you call the staminate, the maroon color. That's the staminate. Okay, so the pollen producing anthers are hidden by the hoods and can only be accessed by tiny insects near the base of the flower. Okay. Some farmers think that honeybees pollinate cacao, but that is not true. Honeybees don't pollinate cacao. Why? Because their size is very big. And because of their size, they cannot enter the space here. The spaces here, the honeybee cannot enter because the space here is only about 2 millimeters. So it takes very small insects to naturally pollinate cacao. Okay, so the style or the female part of the flower is located in the middle of the sterile male bit. Okay, so the style, okay, as you can see in the photo here, is in between the stamenas, and that also makes it very impossible or make it very difficult for insects to access it. Okay, so it takes very small insect to go through and pollinate the flower. So the insect must bypass the stamenas and deposit the pollen on the style. And that is what happens. And it gets more complicated because each tree produces 3 variants of flowers. Okay, every tree has 3 different kinds of flowers. And that is why pollination even gets more complicated. Okay, another problem is called self-incompatibility. Self-incompatibility. What does it mean? What it means is that there are cacao trees, majority of cacao trees cannot pollinate themselves. They cannot pollinate themselves. If the pollen from one flower will drop on the same, on the flower of the same plant, the flower is going to die and fall. Why? Because they are not compatible. And that is the problem in cacao. Therefore, most cacao undergoes cross-pollination. Most cacao undergoes cross-pollination. So the flies have to travel around and pollinate with the pollen from different trees. Okay, So pollination is just a chance of possibility in cacao, actually. Pollination is just a chance or a possibility. Yeah, that is why we need to understand it very well. And farmers, as we understand it and then we put it into practice, we'll be able to increase the yield of our farm. Okay, this is the problem. Pollination rates in cacao tends to be much lower. Okay, usually around 15 to 30% of the flowers will be pollinated by insects. Okay, actually research has showed that only 20%, average of 20% of the flowers on the cacao gets pollinated by insects. So assuming that the cacao has 100 flowers, it means that only 20 will be pollinated, all the rest are going to fall down. And that is crazy, right? So all the yield you are having on your farm is just as a result of just 20% pollination. So just imagine if you can even increase the pollination to just 40%. It means that you are going to double your yield or even triple it. Okay, but the sad thing is that for farms that are not maintained, the pollination rate is just around 3 to 5% only. Okay, just 3 to 5%. So maintenance on the farm is very, very important. Okay, so naturally there is only one type of insect that pollinates cacao. Naturally, there is only one type of insect. Okay, the insect is called midges. It's called midges. So as you can see over here in the photo on the right, okay, so that is a tiny insect, which is like 2 to 3 centimeters only inside. So very, very small and tiny. And this is the only size of insects capable of pollinating cacao. Any insect which has a size bigger than 3 millimeters cannot pollinate cacao because it cannot go through the floral part. It cannot go through the floral part, okay, to get to the male part and then get the pollen grains and then transfer to the female part. It's just not possible, okay? So the midge is very tiny, like I said, like 2 to 3 millimeters only, okay? So the midge live in the decaying part, the decaying matter at the base of the cacao. That is where they live. So when the leaves are rotting on the farm, on the soil, it's a good place for the multiplication of the midges. Okay, so they live there and then they multiply. Okay, they reproduce in the decay matter. Okay, all right. So causes of low yield in cacao include scarcity of main pollinators, okay, especially during the dry season. So yield is low. Yes, partly there are other factors that influence yield. But one of the major factors, especially on farms, which there's a lot of flowers. And if there are a lot of flowers and you're not having enough yield, then it means that the main problem is as a result of pollination, okay? So the characteristic of the cacao flower seem to make it unattractive to potential pollinators, okay? And therefore, only insects that naturally evolve with a tree will successfully pollinate it. So from some research I read, they said that the cacao flower doesn't really have scent, okay? It has no fragrance to attract insects compared to some other flowers that insects are drawn because of the smell and the bright color and so on and so forth. So Cacao flowers are not like that. They don't actually produce smell. If ever they produce, the smell is very mild. Okay, so that's why midges are the only insect that naturally evolve with the cacao and then pollinate the cacao. Okay, so they contact the pollen-bearing stamens, okay, of the flowers, and then transfer the pollen grains from one flower to the other. That is what usually happens. Okay, so cacao flowers are resistant to self-pollination, just like most of the world's flowering plants. So they are very resistant to self-pollination. In other words, most cacao, I mean, more than 98% of cacao are self-incompatible, which means that they cannot pollinate themselves. Okay, they cannot pollinate themselves. So cacao undergoes cross-pollination. So most of the pollen usually distributed from the midges, okay? So they come from the neighbor trees, okay? Like that. So if ever there's any other insect on the farm, and they happen to pollinate the flowers, it just happened by accident. Yeah, it just happened by accident because other insects do not have the capacity to enter to the place of the flower where the pollen grains are because it's too tiny, they cannot go inside. So the ovary of the cacao flower is able to recognize its own pollen grains, okay? And therefore reject the pollen grains, causing the flower to wither and die. That's what happens. So only pollen grains from different trees are able to fertilize the cacao flowers. Okay, so this can lead to very low amount of fruit setting. Okay, recent research into flowering and pollination has led to some very interesting discoveries. Okay, that will impact growers' decision in the coming year. Okay, I must say that there's a lot of research underway presently, and hopefully in the years to come, we can have cacao that are self-compatible. But until now, I mean, it's just not possible. If ever there's any cacao that can self-pollinate, I mean, they are just rare. They are just rare. For now, most cacaos undergo cross-pollination. Okay, so it turns out that most cacao trees will allow at least a few flowers to self-pollinate. Okay, while some varieties permit as much as 50% of them to self-pollinate. Okay, so environmental factors and tree stress can change these percentages. Okay, so assuming you have the insect to pollinate. Okay, factors such as soil moisture, temperature, light, all influence pollination in some way, directly or indirectly. So as long as propagation of the trees occur via softwood cutting and not rely on seed, genetic flaws will not be allowed to develop. Okay, so one way, I'll be talking about this in detail later. But let me say that one way to reduce some of these pollination problems is to propagate the cacao by asexual means or by vegetative means. Okay, now some research findings. Let's talk about some research findings now. Okay, optimal floral production occurs at a temperature of around 22 degrees Celsius. Okay. So for flowering to really take place, the farm temperature should be around 22. Okay, with light intensity of around 91. And then amount of rainfall per month around 1.1. Okay, I know most of us farmers, we don't have the tools to measure all these things. Okay, however, if you are going to use integrated farm management, it is very certain that you can keep this figure. It might not be accurate or the same. However, you will be very close to this kind of figures. For example, you prune well and all those things, you apply enough light, and then the farm is not too crowded, then you can ensure that this will happen. Okay? Because flower stability is affected by seasons pollination. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, if the flower, okay, opens after 24 hours to 36 hours, if it's not pollinated, it drops, it falls. So that is how things are. So to prevent it from falling, then it means that we have to get it pollinated. Okay. All right. Some more research findings. Midges visit the farm more often than any other insect. Okay, so midges are more common on the farm more than bees or any other insect you can think about. So only midges could carry up to 60% of the pollen needed for pollination. Okay, so what that implies is that 60% of the pollination on the farm, okay, is done by midges. Okay, midges are the small insects that naturally evolve with a tree and then pollinate the trees. Okay, so population of midges is significantly greater, okay, under rotten banana pseudo stem than any other substrate. Yeah, this is research discovery. Okay, so if you want to multiply the pollinators on your farm, it means that you need to have a lot of banana stems that are rotting on the farm. Okay, and when that happens, okay, the pollinators are able to lay their eggs there, hatch, and then they will grow and then pollinate the farm. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our first presentation. Okay, so I will just get questions. If you have a question you want to ask, I want you to ask about the first presentation. Okay, about the first presentation. Somebody saying no audio. Can you hear me, everybody? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, any questions so far? If you have questions, you write in the Q&A. About the first presentation, do you have any question? Somebody said the audio is choppy. Okay, so no questions so far, no audio. Okay, somebody is asking, is manual pollination applicable? Yes, it's applicable. We are going to talk about that in detail later. We'll talk about that in detail later. Any other questions? Okay, I have one Q&A. Okay, somebody is asking, what kind of season does flower stability affected? Okay. Yeah, the flower stability is sensitive to temperature. Okay, it's sensitive to temperature. So if temperature on the farm is high, or if the heat on the farm is high, then the flower stability is going to be affected. Okay, flower stability is going to be affected. Number two, if the flower is not pollinated within 24 hours, then it's also going to be affected. it's also going to be affected. It's going to drop within 24 hours to 36 hours. The flower is going to fall down. Okay, so you need to keep the temperature on the farm as cool as possible. Okay, and usually during raining season, you tend to have more flowers simply because the nutrients the water level in the soil is high, the moisture is high. So the trees are able to absorb more, and for that matter, dissolve more nutrients, and then more flowers are produced. Okay, somebody is asking, is banana stalk or banana fruit? Okay, it is the banana stalk, the stalk of the banana or the banana tree, the pseudo stem. Okay, so you can cut, after you harvest the actual banana, you can cut the pseudo stem and distribute them on the farm. As the rods, okay, the rotten pseudo stem become the place that the midges lay their eggs. Okay, somebody is also asking, Rekina is asking, why is splayed staminodes difficult to pollinate? Okay, the splayed staminode is difficult to pollinate because it completely covers the male part of the flower. It covers it, so the insect is not able to go in and get attached. It's not able to get in and get attached to the pollen grains. That is why it's usually difficult to pollinate, because the stamen are completely covered. Okay, somebody is asking, is there low peak and high peak season in cacao? Yes, there is low peak and high peak, but this low peak and high peak are influenced by rainfall. Okay, so for most irrigated farms, there is nothing like low peak and high peak. The difference between low peak and high peak is just very small. If you are able to provide all the water that is needed by the soil, okay, then it means that it's going to be, you are going to have fruit production throughout the entire year. So the low peak and high peak primary is separated or differentiated by rainfall. Okay, so in dry season you have low peak, in rainy season you have high peak, and that is what really happened. Okay, and somebody is also asking, what other substrate options are there to maintain the mixed population? Okay, Tina, research has established that the most convenient, the most ideal place for midges is the banana. However, the midges are also found in other rotting and decaying materials on the farm. Okay, every decaying material like the leaves, like other wood stalks that are decomposing on the farm, the midges live there. However, the midges reproduce mostly on the pseudo stems of banana that are getting rotten. Okay, so that is what usually happens on the farm. Okay, and then somebody is asking, does pollination of insecticides during flowering affect application? Okay, yeah, that is true. Application of insecticide on the farm usually can kill the midges. It can kill the midges. Okay, number one, maybe later I'll talk about that. But applying insecticide should not be done during flowering period. Because if you do it during flowering period, then you are going to kill most of the midges. Because when the trees are flowering, that is the moment that the midges come to eat. Okay, they come to feed. So if you are going to spray, then you are going to kill them. Okay, you are going to kill them. So it's not advisable to spray during flowering. Okay. Lisa is asking, what is the proper time to pollinate? What time, in the morning or in the afternoon? Okay, Lisa, usually the flower opens in the night. Okay, and then when it opens in the night, the right time to pollinate is in the morning. Okay, between 6 a.m. to 10:30, that is the right time to pollinate the farm. Okay, so you don't pollinate it around 11 onwards. So every pollination needs to be done in the morning. Okay, somebody's asking how to produce more midges if one season to produce the young pod. How to produce more midges if midges is one season. Okay, to be able to produce more midges, then you have to make sure that throughout the year you have rotten pseudo bananas on your farm. Okay, so usually it's advisable that you grow some bananas in some part of the farm, so that from time to time you can cut them and distribute all over the farm. Okay, so that is how you can keep the proliferation of midges on the farm for natural pollination. Okay. Neil is asking, does multiple planting of variety of cacao affect pollination? Yeah, there are two ways of answering the question. Usually, variety of cacao does not influence the cacao's pollination ability. Okay, except that grafted trees tend to have less incompatibility, okay, than seeds that are than trees that are grown from seeds. So if your trees are grown from seeds, then you are going to have more pollination problems than seeds that are grown from grafted material, especially if the graft was obtained from compatible varieties. Okay, so that is how it is. Okay, somebody is asking, spraying our cacao with insecticide can kill pollinators? Yes, absolutely yes. Okay, so since you cannot completely eradicate, you cannot stop using insecticide, our only advice is that you reduce the use of insecticides. Okay, for weedicide, don't use weedicides, because weedicides will destroy the breeding ground of the midges, okay, on the farm. So if you use weedicides, then you are going to destroy the midges completely. Okay, so it's advisable that you manually clear the farm. We'll talk about it later. Okay, what are the applicable variety in the highland area? Okay, with varieties presently in the Philippines, the DA has about 6 really good varieties that is really recommended for most farmers. Okay, and then I think they are the K1, K2, K9, well, UF, I think W10, and then I think UF something. Okay, these are the common varieties that are grown here in the Philippines. Actually, they call them the clones, the common clones that are used here in the Philippines. Okay, yeah, but usually for highland varieties, it's recommended you don't grow trees that grow very tall. You have to look for short growing varieties because the tendency of the tree falling down can be high if your trees grow very high. Okay, and then another recommendation is if you have a high land, then it means that you have to control the growth of the trees so that they don't get very tall. Okay, so that is what you need to do. Okay, and somebody is asking, is there any type of insect that attack midges? So far, research has not come up with any kind of insect that attack midges. Throughout my reading, I did not see anything like that. And then throughout my journey as a cacao farmer, I've not also come across any insect that attack midges. However, naturally, there are some insects, okay? There come some kind of spiders that are carnivorous, okay, in nature. There are some insect-eating spiders, okay? If they are on your farm, they are not just going to eat only the midges, but any other insect they may find on the farm, they can eat them as well. Okay, and somebody is asking, black ants can possibly pollinate cacao? Okay, the answer is yes and no. Yes, if the size of the ant is below 3 millimeters. Okay, and let's understand that ants in nature, they don't go to suck the nectar from the tree. Okay, so if ants will pollinate a tree, they pollinate it just by accident. Okay, they pollinate it just by accident. And if ever they will pollinate a tree, it's just by accident. So naturally, they don't pollinate. Okay, because there are few ants that are very small. Okay, those kind of ants, if they happen to crawl around the flower, then likely pollination will happen. But again, remember that, okay, more than 60% of the pollination on the tree is as a result of the midges, okay, that are found on the cacao farm. And somebody is asking, is ants pollinators same as ants? Okay. Yeah, so I think I answered that question already. So ants may pollinate, but it's just by accident. It's just by accident. And then pollination for ants is just for only ants that are small, below 3 millimeters, that can only pollinate. But ants that are bigger than that, you will not be able to pollinate the flower. Okay. Somebody is asking, how do you control insect or fungi attack on fruits without affecting the midges? Okay. So be able to deal with harmful insects on the farm. Okay, spraying should not be done during the period of flowering. Don't spray the farm during periods of flowering because the greatest activity of midges happen during flowering period. Okay, so if you spray the farm during flowering period, then it means that you are going to kill the midges. Most of them are going to die. Okay, so don't spray the farm during periods of flowering. Maybe you are spraying fungicide or insecticide. Make sure it is done when there are less flowers on the trees. Okay, less flowers on the trees. In that case, some midges will die, but you will not kill most of them. Okay. All right. On this note, let's go to our second presentation. Let's go to our second presentation. Okay, we are going to talk about the pre-pollination technique. Pre-pollination techniques. Okay. Okay, this is very important because if you don't do this and you even pollinate your farm, it will be useless. Yeah, so you have to do this. If you do this, then for sure, you can get good results from your pollination. Okay, so the first pre-pollination technique is weeding, okay? Clearing of the farm. So it should be done at the beginning of the raining season. This is because the onset of the rainy season triggers a lot of weed growth. Okay, and as the weeds grow more, they are going to compete for the nutrients in the soil. Okay, however, weedicides are highly discouraged as they have harmful effects on soil microbes and then on the midges. So using weedicide on cacao farms, it's not advisable, not at all. Okay, don't forget I told you that the midges live in the soil. They live on the ground. Most of them live on the ground. So if you are going to spray weedicide, it means that you are going to spray them and they are going to die. They are going to die. So you have to clear the farm manually. Okay, you can use the machete or you can use a motorized slicer or the grass cutter to clear the farm. Okay, so don't use weedicide on your cacao farm. If you really want to keep a good population of midges, then it's not advisable to use weedicides on the farm. Okay, now the second thing you need to do is to prune the farm. Okay, pruning is very important. Why should you prune? Okay, pruning should be done after weeding. So after weeding the farm, you need to prune. Okay, so pruning reduces the incidence of diseases and pests on the farm, and it ensures proper ventilation and light distribution for photosynthesis. Okay, so take note of this, that after you clear the farm, the next thing you need to do is to prune, okay? And then pruning also opens up the branches for flowering. Actually, according to research, okay, when light and ventilation happens to get into the farm well, there is something on the trees which are called the flower cushions, okay? It triggers the flower cushions and then flowers begin to pop up. Okay, so pruning triggers flowering. So if the farm is not pruned well, it means that flowering is going to be very low. Okay, now let's look at the structure of the cacao tree. Okay, and some pruning tools. So as you can see here, as part of pruning, make sure that the level of the canopy is not below 1 meter to 1.5. Actually, it should be 1.5 meters from the ground level, as you can see here. So in this case, you need to cut the basal chipon here. You need to cut it, okay? And then if this canopy, the first canopy here, is below 1.5, it means you have to remove the branches here and allow the second joker to grow. Okay, allow the second joker to grow. Okay, and you have to use these tools to make clean cut all the time. Okay, to avoid damaging the branches or damaging the trees. So the basic aim of pruning the cacao trees is to stimulate flowering and to facilitate harvesting. Take this note very well. Okay, so pruning promotes flowering. Why? Because sunlight and ventilation triggers the flower cushions on the trees, on the stem, so it's able to produce well. So young plants should develop a jochen at a height of at least 1.5 meters above the ground. However, the jochen height varies significantly from tree to tree. Okay, so from the first branching to the ground level, like I said, should be about 1.5 meters, should be about 1.5 meters. Okay, so it has been found that increasing light intensity, okay, decreases the jockey height. Okay, so if the jockey is considered too low, it can be cut off. So if the first branching on the tree is below 1.5 meters, then you have to remove it and let the stem continue to grow up to about 1.5 before branching is made. So the strongest of all the regrowing chupon can be selected and all the others removed. Okay. All right. So in due course, this chupon will produce the token at a higher level. Okay. Vegetatively propagated plants or trees generally form token at the lower level. Okay, so what you need to do is to keep removing the branches until you get the height you are looking for, and then you allow the canopy to be formed. Okay, now let's look at the photo here. Okay, so in number one, the crown is too low. If the crown is too low, okay, black pods become a problem on the farm because ventilation is going to be affected, okay, and sunlight is also going to be affected. So we don't need to have very, very low canopies on the farm. Okay, in photo number two, the canopy is too high, and because it's too high, it makes maintenance of the farm difficult. So don't allow your trees to form canopies very, very high from the ground, because it makes maintenance of the farm difficult. Okay, and then number three, you see here that the branches are too spaced out. So this is also not okay. And then the canopy is formed too low to the soil level. Okay, so you don't allow this. So in situations like this, if you notice that your young cacao trees are branching like that, you need to cut one off and then support the other one with a stick until it's able to stand by itself. Okay, this is important because ventilation and sunlight on the farm promotes flowering and pod formation. So if your farm is not well managed, then it means that you are not going to have a very good yield. Okay. Now in number four, the canopy is too dense. Okay, so what you have to do is you need to cut off all branches that are not receiving direct sunlight, or the hidden branches, you need to cut them so that ventilation could move. Okay, with proper ventilation, And then sunlight will also penetrate, okay, for proper photosynthesis to take place. Okay. And then in number 5, you see that the canopies are overlapping. Over here, the canopies are overlapping. Okay, as you can see here. So you need to cut this area off, to make sure that the trees are not overlapping. Okay, and then in number 6, you see part of the branch is broken off. Okay, usually this happens as a result of maybe a tree in the farm falling down, or a banana tree fell on the cacao and then it's broken. So in this case, you need to allow the branch here to continue to grow. And you have to stake this area with a stake so that it doesn't fall over. You need to stake it with a stake. Okay. So these photos here are going to guide us in doing the pruning. Okay, so if your cacao tree is like this, it means you have to trim the top. You need to trim the top so that it will be around 3 meters. Okay, 3 meters above the soil level, or at most about 3.5 meters. Okay, and then you have to remove the leaves here. Okay, because the pods are going to be formed here. As a matter of fact, in areas where there are leaves, pods don't form there. Know this very well. Okay, if there are too many leaves on your tree, it affects pod production. So you need to remove some of them, okay, to make sure that there is enough sunlight, there is enough ventilation. So if you remove this area, then it's going to look like this one here. Okay, so this is a properly pruned farm. A properly pruned farm. Okay, so you need to remove the overlapping edges, and then it will look like this one here. Okay, so all the open areas are going to produce flowers and produce pods. Okay, that is one thing you should know. And this is what I was talking about, 1.5 meters above ground level. Okay, 1.5 meters. So if the canopy is being formed here, then you have to remove them. Okay, it has to be removed. And over here, you see that, okay, this canopy is too high. So it means that this tree was not properly trained. It was not properly trained. So if you have a young tree, just make sure that you train the trees well, so that they will not have too high canopies. Okay, and then in your current cacao farm, you can trim the upper part of the trees to allow sun to get inside the farm. Okay, like that. Okay, and then in this case here, we have a by trunk. Okay, so by trunk can look like this. So in this case here, all the overlapping branches, you need to trim them off. Okay, don't allow overlapping branches. Okay, because it creates a very dense canopy to the extent that ventilation and sun penetration is affected. Okay, again, I would say that right from the ground level, if ever you are going to allow multiple stems, it should be 2 stems. 2 stems at the ground level. 2 stems. This is important because the more stems you have, okay, the smaller the pods are going to be. Because don't forget that all the stems are dependent on just the same roots. Okay, so if you remove some of the stems, it means that the food which is being produced are going to be translated into pod production. And then you are going to have bigger pods at the same time. Okay, so proper way of pruning. So you cut like this, not like this one. Okay, if there's any drooping branches, like this one here, you need to remove it. Okay, you have to use the proper tool to do the pruning. Okay, now another technique. Okay, we have talked about weeding, we have talked about pruning. Okay, shade management. Okay, a 70% shade is best suited for the early growth and development of young cacao trees. Okay, so it's like this. They should be gradually reduced to 50% for 3-year-old trees, and then 25% for 7-year-old trees. So if you have trees that are just 1 year old or 1.5 years old, then the shade level should be around 70%. For 3-year-old trees, you need 150% shading. And then for about 3 years and more, you need 25% shading. Okay, so two types of shade trees usually are used, which are the temporal shade trees and the permanent shade trees. So let's talk about that. Okay, according to Yaboa 2017, shade trees have limited benefit for soil fertility in agroforest. Okay, so what that means is that directly, shade trees do not significantly add nutrients to the soil, apart from preserving the soil from direct sunlight and then keeping the soil cool. So as you can see here in B, so we have this here, 70% shade cover, then we have 50% shade cover and 25% shade cover. So we have 1-year-old trees here, we have 3-year-old trees here, and more than 3-year-old trees over here, like that. So the more the trees grow older, the less shading is needed. Okay. So cacao growth is lower under individual shade trees and decreases with increasing shade cover. Okay, and cacao yield is decreased with increasing shade cover. What that means is that as your farm grows older, you need to reduce the shade. Okay, assuming that your farm is like 5 years old, and then you have 50% shade cover, it means yield is going to go down. That is why it's not advisable to grow cacao in rubber plantations. Yeah, because initially the cacao will be doing well, but after 3 years, 4 years, the cacao will not do well anymore unless the shade trees are cut down. Because the older the cacao grows, the less shade it is needed. Okay, so if your cacao is 7 years old and you have all these big trees on your farm, then the cacao is not going to do well. Okay, so 2 types of shading. Let's talk about these 2 types of shading. Okay, so temporary shade can usually bananas are the best for cacao. Like we talked about before, bananas are the best. Actually, in my country, new cacao farm, they are intercrop. Or let me put it this way, they are mixed crop with some other crops on the farm. But the most predominant is bananas. In my country, we have what we call plantain. Plantain is the Musa sapientum. Okay, it's the big banana, Okay, so that is what we use to grow cacao. All right, so you can grow the cacao together with the bananas. And initially, there will be temporal shading. Okay, so as they grow older, then the actual trees will serve to provide shading. when they are taller than the banana trees. Okay, like that. Okay, so permanent shade. Okay, so usually for mature trees, okay, you don't need so much shading, like I said. Okay, so permanent canopy forms usually for mature trees. Okay, so make sure that for mature trees, mature cacao trees, you have less trees growing on the farm. And the trees should not be so big that you cannot control their growth. Okay, they should be something you have planted by yourself. So usually you should grow the shade trees 1 year before you plant the cacao, except that you already had some trees growing on the farm. Okay, in that case, you can cut them down and the shoot will begin to grow. And then you control the growth of the shoot of those trees on the farm as the cacao begins to grow. So in a photo here, you can see this cacao is about 1 year old only. So they are growing together beautifully with the bananas. And this is perfect for midge growth, for midges. Okay, so the midges will begin to grow, reproduce. So by the time the cacao is like 3 years old, there are enough midges on the farm. Okay, so next is fertilizer application. So in applying fertilizer, we have to follow the 4R strategy. The 4R strategy, which is the right type, the right amount, the right timing, and the right placement. Very important. So heavily shaded trees or field do not respond well to fertilizer application. Okay, so if your cacao has too much shade, then the cacao will not respond well to fertilizer application. So use fertilizers as recommended based on the result of soil test. Okay, so use nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilizers if the soil is lacking in these nutrients. Okay, so the amount and type of fertilizer required vary from age of the plant and to the type of soil. So we'll give some general recommendations which could be applicable depending on the soil condition. Okay, so number 1, for newly transplanted cacao. Newly transplanted cacao. Okay, so for newly transplanted cacao, they need to grow more roots. So more phosphorus fertilizers are required. Okay, so the soil test, if the soil test show that the soil does not have enough phosphorus, okay, then use NPK at a ratio of 12 to 24 to 12. Okay, so it means that it's higher in phosphorus. And the rate is 0.1 kilogram per plant. Okay, take note of this. Okay, so for 1 to 3 year old trees, okay, if the soil is lacking in nitrogen, usually 1 to 3 years old, it has to grow vigorously because it will begin to produce flowers and pods. Okay, so if the soil is lacking nitrogen, okay, young trees to receive 2 applications of fertilizer, okay, high in nitrogen for shoot development. For example, you can apply NPK 30-10-10 at a rate of 0.2 kilograms twice per year for the first 3 years. Okay, 1 to 3 years. Okay, so take note of this. So actively growing trees that are over 3 years old, okay, if the soil is lacking in nitrogen, okay, so you are going to apply NPK 30-10-10. But this time the rate is going to increase to 0.4 kilograms per tree twice per year on the farm. Okay, now let's look at for flowering trees. Okay, so for flowering and fruiting trees, okay, they have high requirement for nitrogen and potassium. So if these are lacking in the soil, a fertilizer such as NPK, which has 16,824, could be applied, okay? And the recommended rate is 0.4 to 1.2 kilograms twice per year, So on the market, you might not get the exact figures, but if you get figures that are around the same figure, around this figure, then that is okay. So you might not get 16,824, but you may get 15,1025, which is okay. So anything similar to these values is okay. So now let's look at placement of fertilizer. So for young cacao plants, fertilizer should be placed in a circular order, okay, like 5.1 to 10.2 centimeters, okay, away from the root. Okay, you could also gauge, make a circle, looking at the canopy level, okay, around the tree, and then you put the fertilizer in a circular order, okay, like that. Okay, so the plants, as the plants mature, the fertilizer should be applied in circular bands located far away from the trunk of the tree. Okay, however, in mature trees, it is best to just broadcast the fertilizer all on the farm. So just sprinkle everything, broadcast it on the farm. No need to put it in a circular, because when the tree is 5 years old, the roots have gone very far away, so you cannot even know where to put the fertilizer. So just sprinkle on the farm. Then when it rains, everything will be dissolved into the soil. Now let's look at the timing for fertilizer application. So ideally, fertilizer should be applied to young cacao plants in 3 to 4 applications per year. So trees that are below 1 year old, like 6 months old, application could be done average of 3 times a year using the same concentrations that we mentioned earlier. So one application can be made at the beginning of the rainy season, and then the remaining applications whenever there is rainfall. So like 3 times in a year, like that. Okay. So this is some recommendation from Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast is the leading cacao producer in the world. Okay, Ivory Coast is the second cacao leading producer in the world. So according to a research from Ivory Coast, sandy soils, okay, you can use NPK 13, 10, 15. If the soil is granite, you can use 12, 15, 18. Okay. However, the quantities for each tree should be as follows. So during the first 2 years, okay, can apply 125 grams in April. And then in September, you apply another 125. And then when the trees grow, after 3 years, you can apply 250 grams in April, and then 250 grams in September. But understand that in Ivory Coast, the rainy season begins in April. In Philippines, the rainy season begins in July, August, which means that the first application should be done in July, August, not in April. Okay, so get this clearly. Okay, so the fertilizer application begins at the rainy season. After you've weeded the farm and then you have pruned the farm, the next thing to do is to apply the fertilizer. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the second presentation. Okay, so if you have, let's answer the questions over here. I think we have 4 questions. Okay, so let's try to answer them. We have the first question. Do you think the rainy season and solution is drying of smallpox, usually during the fruit, 1 inch to 3 inch? Okay. Somebody is asking if what do you think is the season and is the season solution to, I don't get your point. Ojo, I don't get your point well. What do you think is the season and solution? What do you think is the season and solution is drying of, what do you mean? I don't understand. Do you mean wilting of the pods, of the small pods? Ojo, is that what you mean? Wilting of the small pods. Okay, we'll go back to Ojo is asking again. So do you think natural farming technique, like applying of indigenous microorganisms, can also help? Yes, it can really help a lot. Okay, it can really help a lot. As a matter of fact, if you want to practice organic cacao, which has a higher price today, then you can use all those. You can use the indigenous techniques, okay, to help improving the soil condition. Okay. And then Ian is asking, it seems like your presentation said for seed, not on grafted. My question is, what is the best plant? What is the best plant, cacao grafted or seed? Okay. Ian, presently, here in the Philippines, that will be different from my country. Here in the Philippines, UF18 and W10, they are the most favorite varieties on the market now. Why? Because the W10 has big seeds, and then the UF18 is yielding. Okay, so if you want to graft, it's good you graft UF18. Okay, that is very good for having high yield. So when you graft and then you ensure these pollination techniques we are talking about, then you can for sure get high yield. Okay, Ian is asking again, is the study predict what year cacao produce pods, either seeds or grafted? Okay. Ian again, usually grafted cacao produce flowers and pods earlier than cacao raised from seeds. Okay, why? Because the part you are taking from the mother plant to be grafted is already mature. As a matter of fact, it has the capacity to produce flowers already. Okay, so usually that is how it is. Grafted produce pods earlier than trees that are grown from seeds. Okay, however, it also depends on varieties. Some varieties produce pods earlier. Okay, present in the Philippines, you can get cacao bearing fruits from even 1.5-year-old to 2 years old, right? Yeah, the UF18 can produce around 2 years old. Okay. Okay, somebody is asking, is it good to use foliar fertilizer? Yes, it is good to use foliar fertilizer, especially when the trees are young. For big trees, it's very difficult to use foliar fertilizer. As a matter of fact, all the fertilizer is going to fall on your head. As you spray them up, it's going to fall on you. Okay, for young trees, foliar fertilizer is good. Okay. Ojo is asking again, reason of rotting of black pot. Okay, Ojo, black pots really occurs so much in farms that are poorly ventilated, and then on farms that have less sunlight penetration. Okay, because fungi and bacteria begin to grow well in areas which are very humid like that. Okay, so if your trees are very short, close to the ground level, then you might have more incidences of black pots. You may have more incidences of black pots. Okay, because don't forget that most of the diseases and pests come from the soil. They have the soil as their home. So the closer the pot to the soil level, the more disease problem you are going to have. And let me say that it is always to keep good farm management. So if you're using integrated farm management, then it means that if ever you spot a black pot on your farm, you remove it and you don't put it on the farm again. Just throw it somewhere outside the farm or take a pit somewhere and then drop it in. And then just make sure your pruning is done well. Okay, at least 2 times a year you do pruning, and then you clear your farm of weeds. You have enough ventilation. If that happens, you might have less issue of black pots. Okay, you cannot completely eliminate it, but reduce it drastically. You can really reduce it drastically. Okay. Joe is asking again, and any possible solution for it? Okay, I think that is answered already. Okay, sir, do you think we can raise free-range chicken on the cacao farm? Yes, you can raise free-range chicken on the cacao farm. It's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, it will make the farm better, except that the flowers that are lower, the chickens are going to pick them up. Okay, they will pick them up. If the flowers are at the ground level, then they are going to pick them up. But there's nothing wrong raising free-range chicken on your farm. Okay, somebody is also asking, Ronald is asking, is it okay to conduct pruning during flowering season or not? Okay, Ronald, it's not recommended except there is the need for it. For example, you have not pruned your farm for 2 years. And then now you are hearing me, I'm talking about pruning. Okay, it is good you go to the farm and prune it. So you go to the farm, you check the branches which do not have enough flowers on them. Then you cut them off. Just to create enough ventilation and enough space for the flowers to pollinate. But the problem is that as you are cutting, you are shaking the trees. And as you shake the trees, some of the flowers can also fall at the same time. So there's no problem with trying to pruning when flowering is taking place already. However, the proper time to prune the trees is before fertilization. Okay, before fertilization. Okay, and then Ian is asking again, is the fertilizer application applied before or after flowering? Ian, it is applied before flowering because it is the fertilization that is going to trigger flowering. Okay, because flowers are produced because there's enough nutrients in the soil. So you apply the fertilizer after pruning, and then after you apply the fertilizer, the flowers will begin to bloom massively. You are going to have massive bloom of your flowers. Okay, and then Glenn is asking, in the Philippines, we practice cellophane pot sleeving to prevent young pods from the insect. What are the alternatives to prevent us from this technique? Okay, Glenn, I have had the privilege to visit so many farms. And then as I travel, I have traveled all the way from Davao to Kalinan area. I've also traveled from Davao to Maragusan area and to New Bataan. And I have seen so many farms. And then what I have noticed is that the farm is friendly for insect and pests and borers because of poor farm management, honestly. Okay, so there is something called microclimate. Okay, the microclimate is conducive for disease and pests because they don't manage the farm well. That is why there's a lot of disease and pests. And then the pod borers like that. Okay, however, if you are going to well prune your farm and do enough clearing, and all the big trees that are covering the cocoa, you're going to make sure you reduce the shading as much as possible, then the problem of pod borers and the problem of insects is going to be reduced drastically. It's going to be reduced. Okay, so insect pests and pod borers, they are predominant because of poor management of the farms here. Okay, so that is one thing you should know. Okay, so you can, just to try, maybe you can divide your farm. I will talk about that later, but just to help to answer this question. Just get one particular area of the farm, just prune it very well, okay? Just to test and see if things will go well or not. Okay, prune it well, make sure it's well pruned, make sure there's no weed, not too much shade, like that. And don't cover the pot with plastic. Don't sleeve them. And see if the trees, if the pots are going to be destroyed or not. Okay, so you can try this practically and note it. But my answer is that as much as management of the farm is being done well, then the issue of disease and pests is going to be very low on the farm. And you will be able to have your plots growing nicely, not needing to sleeve them or to cover them. Okay, Rikina is asking, what is the unit ratio for the fertilizer? Okay, Rikina, I think I talked about this earlier. The ratio depends on the age of the fertilizer and even the type of soil. So it's in the handout. Please read it. Go back to the handout and check it out because it differs from your first year, below 1 year, what you need to apply, 0.1 kilograms, which should be done like 3 times a year, okay? And then we said when it's around 3 years old, you increase it to 0.2 kilograms. But in the 1 year old, your concentration is to increase phosphorus concentration, okay, on the farm. But when it's 3 years old, your concentration is to increase nitrogen on the farm. So the NPK concentration differs. Okay, so just cross-check the handout again, and then you will get the full answer there. Okay. And then Lisa is asking, is it possible to prune cacao at flowering? It is possible, but it is not recommended, except that the trees have not been pruned for more than 1 year, 2 years. Then you can go back to your farm and then just cut all those branches which are not having flowers on them. But you have to follow the procedure I talked about. Okay, how to do the pruning, you need to follow. Okay. Okay, Joe is asking again, said does fertilizer affect seed development? Yes, it affects seed development, Joe. Okay, that is why before flowering, after pruning, you really need to apply the fertilizer. The richer the soil is, okay, the more the seed will develop better. Okay, the more the seed will develop better. Okay, so the amount of nutrient and water in the soil influence the seed development. Okay, Glenn is asking, what is the correct timing for pruning? Okay, the correct timing for pruning is at the beginning of the rainy season. After weeding the farm, you need to prune. Okay, is it true, Cacao, young pots wither if we apply pruning during, is it true that young pots wither if we apply pruning during pot development? Not necessarily. Okay, not necessarily. When you are pruning, just make sure you don't hurt the pots. Okay, make sure you don't hurt the pots. And make sure you also don't expose the young pot to too much sunlight. Okay, because it's if there's too much sunlight, it can destroy the pot. So don't hurt the pot. Make sure you don't put any scratches or breakages on the small pot. And make sure you don't also expose it to too much sunlight. Okay. Rikina is asking, what is the unit? Yeah, in kilograms, but not sure if you're using, note that if you're using kilograms, like I said, it's 0.1 kilograms. Okay, so if it's grams, then you have to convert 0.1 kilogram to grams. Okay, Rikina, I hope I answered. So it depends on the weighing scale you are using. If the weighing scale is in grams, then you weigh in grams. Okay, so if it's in kilograms, then you weigh in kilograms. However, you need to just follow the correct amount that is required. Okay, Rekina, I hope I answered your question. The unit of the ratio. Okay, I hope I answered, Rekina. Okay, good. Rekina is also asking again, when you use NPK 1310, okay, all right. Rekina, what it means is that if you have NPK 1310.5, it means that it contains 13% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, and 5% potassium. Okay, that is what it means. So if you buy the fertilizer, you find it on it. Okay, so when you are measuring, if your cacao is below 1 year old, just measure 0.1 kilograms. Okay, so every 0.1 kilogram, it means that it contains 13% 13% nitrogen and 10 for phosphorus and 5 for potassium. Okay, so that is what it means. Okay, so you just have to measure the amount which is required. Don't bother about the numbers. Okay, make sure that the numbers you are using is almost the same as the numbers we have told you. Okay, so the numbers, it talks about the amount of nutrients that are found in the fertilizer. Okay, then one more question, then we move to the last presentation. Okay, so Rema is asking, some fruit in cacao are attacked by padra rot. Usually it's a problem during the raining season, okay? All right, and then it's most of the time caused by fungi. Okay, it's most of the time caused by fungi. If your farm is a low-lying area whereby the farm gets flooded during rainy season, then it means you are going to have more problem with fruit rot like that. Okay, however, if your farm is not usually flooded, then if you are prune the farm well before the heavy rainy season, then you are going to have less issues of fruit rot. You are going to have less issues of fruit rot. Okay, if you are able to prune the farm very well before the onset of the rainy season or before the heavy rains begin. Okay, that is one way to do it. Another way to do it, before flowering, you can spray the farm with fungicide. Before flowering, okay, you can spray the farm with a fungicide, and then it will make the trees ready, okay, for flowering to take place. And because flowering has not set in yet, okay, all right, okay. Somebody saying pot rot, okay, or fruit rot, okay, that's okay. So you can do the spraying of fungicide before the rainy season begins, okay? So you have upfront a way to shield the new coming pods from the rotten. Okay, so number one, I said proper pruning before the rain begins. Okay, and number two, you can use a fungicide. So before flowering, you spray the farm. So you clear the weeds, you prune, okay, you put your fertilizer, and then you can spray. Okay, because if you spray during flowering, you are going to kill the midges. Okay, that's the problem. Okay, so you need to make sure that you do all these things when flowering has not set in. Okay, because your goal is to increase pollination. So you don't want to do anything which will affect the pollinators. Okay. All right, so this brings us to the end of the second presentation. So before we move on to the third presentation, I want us to have just 5 minutes break. And then after 5 minutes break, we are going to continue. Okay, so maybe you want to use the CR. So 5 minutes, you